And we're back with Stephen of the Washington Free Beacon. And sorry. So you recently wrote another piece regarding silencers. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Well, actually, before we do that, there was another thought that you wanted to communicate that I completely forgot about.
Yeah, well, so we were talking a little bit about language and correcting language, mm-hmm. and sort of gun control groups or uninformed reporters getting, the language wrong, the terminology wrong. Sometimes I will say that there are people in the gun community who sometimes think they're informed and they're not necessarily. And so this silencer piece is a good example. Or they'll take something that's like an opinion.
Yeah.
And then blow it up as though this is absolute fact.
Yeah, I do it all the time in my gun reviews.
Anytime I write about silencers or suppressors, I'll have at least 5 or 6 people in my mentions on Twitter being like, "You're an idiot. It's not called a silencer. It's called a suppressor because it doesn't make the gun silent." And while it's true that silencers do not make a gun silent, they suppress the sound that they make. The industry term is still silencers, or at least I think it's a perfectly acceptable term. It's what the ATF uses. It's what Hiram Maxim used when he invented the things in the first place. And it's also the name of the largest maker of silencers.
That to me, the funny thing is you say that. I actually went through that myself. I forgot what it was. I think I wrote a piece or something, and I called it a silencer. And I had people jumping on my comments like, it's actually called a suppressor. And I think in another piece I did, and I was like, I use silencer and suppressor interchangeably because you use a silencer to suppress the sound of a firearm. And so it's like...
You call it a muffler, too, if you wanted.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, the muffler is the same technology.
Yeah, it's interesting as hell. I mean, it's like, again, like that's kind of like the more pedantic aspects of the gun industry gone wrong, because it's like, all right,
people can go overboard.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. But I learned it as the actual designer and inventor of silencers called them silencers. Right. So I call them silencers and suppressors too. So technically, if you really want to be honest, technically suppressor could be argued to be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both right. I mean, I get why people don't like the term silencer because of the way Hollywood. It's more about how Hollywood portrays them as actually silencing the gun completely, to where you don't even know a gun's been fired, which is nonsense. Even in John Wick 2, which everyone loves for its sort of accurate gunfighting or more accurate gunfighting. There's a scene where they're shooting at each other in a train station with silencers and no one notices. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
But then again, it's like me arguing the K in no, in the word no. It's kind of like no. I mean, it's K and O-W. I get it. It sounds like N-O, but nonetheless, that's exactly what it's called. That's what it was designed for. It was.
But so it can be hard. You can get it from both sides sometimes, where people who don't know anything about fire, at least people who try to correct you on the silencer suppressor thing, they know something about firearms.
Yeah, which is true. Which is very, very true.
But you can get it from all sides sometimes when you're trying to be, accurate with your terminology.
But and the interesting thing though, and I've always made this argument, the problem I have, or some of the frustrations that I run into is, when I do try to counter a narrative, I have to go so far to make sure my information is correct before I put it out there. However, on the other side, they're not subject to the same type of level of checking and making sure things are correct, and it's frustrating because they can just say whatever, and so it's just left to me to come out there and put information out that counters that false information. It drives me insane.
Yeah, and I would say that as annoying as it's not a silencer, it's a suppressor people can be, they're better than people who try to tell me that silencers are the tools of assassins, so they can shoot silently and deadly, like it's a fart or something. Like that's not how it works. And
I blame the movies. I do. I blame movies. I blame TV shows. And,
of course.
And is it fair for me to blame them? Yes. Just because I grew up that way for all intents and purposes until I really got into guns and I understood. Okay, and I heard a silencer for the first time. I was like, God, there's nothing silent about that.
Right.
You know, of course, you know, it mitigated the sound tremendously, but I walked away thinking, okay, all right, so everything in the movies, generally speaking, when it comes to silencers, is incorrect. And so it's
much.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty much everything. Every movie I've ever seen about that someone had a silencer. That's not at all what a silencer really sounds like.
And then too, again, it takes on this nefariousness that comes with the idea of a silencer, and so that when we try to get things passed like the Hearing Protection Act, you know, there's just another mountain we have to climb, and then that's another tool in the toolbox of the anti-gunners to use to kind of scare people into submission and say, don't vote for this, don't let this happen, fight against it, rage against it because it's evil, and I'm like, oh,
Right.
God.
Which is a great segue into the next story we're going to talk about, right?
Oh yeah,
Because in real life, people don't use silencers in crimes.
They don't. They don't.
Not really.
I mean, largely they're cumbersome as hell. They're relatively hard to come by, and then yet and still, even if they did, we're still dealing with a pretty significant sound report. Mm-hmm. Like no one's going through a room and clearing and just start shooting indiscriminately, and no one is aware that something's going on. It just doesn't. I just don't see that happening. Nor does it happen. So from your research in terms of the crimes, because silencers are out there. It's not like they're illegal and you can't get them. You know, we readily have access to silencers. It's just an insane process and honestly an arbitrary kind of guard post that is put in place that paying $200 or arbitrary $200 tax for something just because is it's asinine to me, and I still haven't completely wrapped my head around it. But what was some of the interesting things that you found in terms of writing this piece with respect to the fact that not many people use silencers in the commission of a crime?
Right. Well, I mean, I think there were two interesting things, right? One is how popular silencers are now, which is something, if you're in the gun world, if you're at SHOT Show, when I came on to talk about my experience there, silencers are out there. They're extremely popular. And they've only gotten more popular recently, according to the ATF's numbers. There was an explosion in silencer ownership, in the number of silencers registered with the ATF over the last year alone.
Why do you think that is?
More than 1 million. And then the second point is that they're just not used in crimes very often. It's something like 0.0000003%. Of silencers were used in a crime last year.
That's crazy.
Which is like nothing, basically. I mean, and we can know exactly how many because every silencer in the country is registered. And then, you know, the interesting thing, the ATF didn't outline what crimes were committed with silencers, but it did say that there's only a handful were used by people who already had felony convictions.
Gotcha.
So criminals, right?
Yeah.
And then it wouldn't say whether they were used to actually commit a crime or whether the crime was involved with registering the silencer itself.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I think my feeling is that a lot of the crimes that silencers have been involved in over the last several years
are the actual acquisition of the silencer.
Registration of the silencer itself, not in like robbing someone.
Gotcha. Man. But then again, like, let somebody else tell it who doesn't really follow this issue. If you were to ask them that question and they think, I'm pretty sure they'd give you a totally different answer, something with an exorbitantly high number with respect to how many times a silencer was used in a crime. And again, it goes back to that lack of education, lack of knowledge with respect to the subject matter that we're constantly going to have to be fighting and checking against. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, really appreciate it, Stephen, man. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. And look forward to having you back on the show. So keep that pen going, man. All right, man. So when we come back, Kent Ogden from Kenai Pro Gear joins me.